ever imagined, like a samurai learning to milk a cow in 19th century Connecticut? Well, that's our Manjiro in chapter 16. And today's deep dive, we're really going to unpack this whole cultural mashup, using the chapter A and D, those 5 essays you sent. They're really insightful.
It's such a clever setup, right? You've got Manjiro's life on the farm straight from the book, but then these essays give us all these different ways to see it, to think about what it all means.
Yeah, it's like multi-layered, like a cake.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into it, just a quick reminder for our listener, where Manjiro's at. He's gone from shipwreck to being rescued. Now he's basically living in the lap of luxury compared to what he's used to.
Right. The chapter makes a big deal about how fancy the Whitfields house is, glass windows, carpets. He's got his own room. Manjiro, coming from, well, poverty in Japan, this would have blown his mind. It's almost like a fairy tale.
Totally. But, and here's where the fairy tale gets real, it's not all fun and games. Manjiro's got chores now. Weeding, milking cows. Not exactly samurai stuff, huh?
And that's important. The essays, some of them suggest that, see, by giving him these chores, the Whitfields are saying, this is how you become part of our world. It's not just charity. It's like shaping him.
Which makes young Terry showing up even better. Okay, you described this scene, and I gotta say, Manjiro, falling off the horse, plumbed up right when he meets Terry. Comedy gold. Like, straight out of buddy movie.
Total meet cute, yeah. And you couldn't ask for a better way to show how different these two kids are. Terry, the all-American farm boy, right? And there's Manjiro, still figuring out this whole America thing.
And yet, boom, instant friends.
Yeah.
What is it about being that age that just, breaks down those cultural walls?
I think it's that they're both, curious about the world. Terry's got this American adventurous spirit, and that's new for Manjiro. But Manjiro, even though he's struggling, you can tell he wants to learn to see things through Terry's eyes.
And, of course, the fishing scene.
Yeah.
Though, can we just appreciate how Manjiro fillets that fish? The chapter's like, this ain't your mama's fish fry prep, this is samurai skill.
Oh, for sure. It reminds us that Manjiro's not just soaking up American stuff. He's got things to offer, even if, nobody quite gets how impressive it is yet.
And then there's Terry, trying to teach Manjiro to ride. Some laugh-out-loud moments there.
Yeah.
But one essay made this point, kind of stuck with me. Manjiro falling off, then getting back on. That's the whole immigrant experience right there.
Oh, yeah. That's deep. But it's true. It takes guts to adapt to a new culture. Manjiro could give up, say it's too hard, but he doesn't.
And through all this, they start opening up. Manjiro teaches Terry about cricket cages, playing ghost stuff you just wouldn't see in Connecticut otherwise.
And Terry, just by being himself, is like, welcome to America 101 for Manjiro. It proves that real cultural exchange, it's not in a textbook. It's just living life alongside each other.
Which brings us to the samurai stories. Terry's hooked. But when he asks if Manjiro would be a samurai back in Japan, Manjiro hesitates. Small detail, huge impact.
Right. Why not just say no? He knows he could never be a samurai, fisherman's son. Japan's social ladder doesn't work that way, so what's he hiding? Seriously. Is he trying to impress Terry? Clinging to a fantasy? There's got to be more to it.
Oh, the essays dive deep into this. They say, this is Manjiro's identity crisis right here. He clearly thinks samurai are, the ideal.
Yeah.
Honorable, disciplined.
He even starts describing these crazy sword moves, the zigzag, the reverse dragonfly. Kind of made up, right?
Maybe, maybe not. Point is, these stories, true or not, they're what Manjiro wishes he could be. Respected, powerful, and hey, maybe with Terry looking up to him, he doesn't want to ruin that.
It's like, we all have different sides to us, right? Who we are versus who we want to be seen as, especially by people we like.
Totally, it's human nature. But it makes you think, how much of ourselves do we show, and how much do we keep hidden just to fit in? And speaking of fitting in, we haven't even touched on Albertina's arrival to the Whitfield house and the horse's name change, going from Plum Duff to just Duffy. You pointed these out, and they're kind of crucial here. So much in just one chapter. But before we get to that, let's hear from you, dear listener. What's grabbing your attention? What stands out? Think about it during this quick break, and we'll be right back to explore even more. Back again, diving deeper into chapter 16. It's crazy, a story from, the 1800s? And it still feels relevant. Especially this whole, cultural adaptation, figuring out who you are.
That's the power of a good story, though, right? They connect with us no matter what. And speaking of connecting, Albertina shows up. Big moment in this chapter.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned her in your notes. Easy to miss. It's like, new wife, okay? But the essays say there's more to it.
Way more. It's not just that she's, the woman of the house now, though that was a big deal back then. Some essays say she's this whole softer side of America that Manjiro hasn't really seen yet.
True. I mean, Captain Whitfield's kind, but kind of gruff, practical. Albertina's all warmth, kindness. Totally different vibe.
Right. And one essay even wondered, Manjiro's missing his own Devon family, right? Maybe, even without realizing it, Albertina being there, it's comforting. Not the same as mom, but close to that home feeling the chapter keeps mentioning.
It makes you think. How much of Manjiro trying so hard to fit in, to please the Whitfields, is just him wanting to belong, to feel safe again?
Big question, right? We all need that, somewhere to belong. And speaking of belonging, Plum Duff becomes just Duffy. Small detail, big discussion in the essays.
Seriously, it's just a horse's name, but
Yeah.
they're saying it's symbolic.
Oh, yeah. It's Manjiro, changing too. Adapting, trying to fit in, but not forgetting who he is either.
It's like he's testing out this new language, how Americans name things. Duffy just sounds, I don't know, more natural here. And it's Terry, his buddy, who suggests it, and Manjiro goes with it.
Exactly. He's open to changing, to taking bits of this new culture for himself, not becoming someone totally different, but blending it in. He's, to use your word, finding his balance on that horse, even if he falls off sometimes.
And speaking of balancing, Manjiro himself, he's got this internal struggle going on. On one hand, he respects the hard work, the farm life. But then, bam, samurai stories slicing through 7 guys at once. Who's he trying to convince, Terry? Himself.
It's wild, right? The essays suggest all this back and forth, real life versus samurai fantasy. It's because deep down, he wants to be recognized, respected. In Japan, fisherman son, that was IT. Your whole life decided. No changing it.
Whereas America, it's all land of opportunity. So maybe those samurai stories, it's the heroic version of himself, the powerful one.
And not just physically tough. Samurai represent honor, discipline, being really good at something. Those are universal. Any culture would get that.
Makes you wonder, how much of who WE think we are is just the stories we tell ourselves, the roles we play, even if they're not totally true to life. And what else is interesting about the chapter itself? It keeps putting opposite ideas right next to each other.
Yeah.
Ship versus farm, samurai versus fisherman. Even Manjiro falling off the horse is funny. Then bam, serious samurai talk.
Oh, you're onto something. One essay said, that's the author messing with us, making us think. Are those things really opposites? Or is there something connecting them that we're not seeing?
Oh, I love that. Like a hidden puzzle. On the surface, samurai, farm boy, totally different. But look closer. Both defined by their duty, what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Both got to be tough, resourceful, in their own ways.
Right. So maybe the point isn't, could Manjiro be a Connecticut samurai? It's more like, who's he going to choose to be now that he's here?
Yeah.
What matters to him? How does he make his past and present fit together?
Now, those are questions we could all relate to, right?
For sure. But we got to pause here for a sec. Don't worry, we're coming back to tie it all together. And most importantly, what this all means for you, our listener. Stay with us.
And we are back. We've gone deep, deep, deep into Manjiro's world in chapter 16. And now it's like, okay, what do we learn? How does it apply,
It's always fun to pick apart a story. But yeah, the good stuff is when it makes us think about our own debut in lives, right?
100%. Like when a movie's so good, you walk out still debating it. So here's a question for all you listeners. Think about this. If you were Manjiro, suddenly plopped down in Connecticut, 1800s, what would you do? How do you even begin to handle that culture shock?
It's easy to say, oh, I'm super open-minded. But imagine, the food's different, the language. Heck, people act different. How much would you change just to fit in?
Right, and the chapter's big on this whole, staying true to yourself versus taking advantage of new opportunities. Those samurai stories, they matter to Manjiro. It's who he is, kinda.
Yeah.
But in America, would he even feel okay talking about that?
It makes you wonder, would anyone even get it? Or would it always be like, this part of him he has to hide to be accepted?
That's real, even now. Maybe not samurai stuff, but that feeling, you've heard of code switching, right? Changing how you talk, act, depending on who's around.
Totally. We all want to belong. It's
Yeah.
natural. The trick is doing it without losing yourself, How do we stay us, but also be open to new stuff? It's a balance.
Manjiro's whole deal, right?
Yeah.
Finding his balance, literally, on that horse, Duffy. But also, metaphorically, like you said. It's exciting, scary, figuring it all out.
And that's why we love stories, yeah.
Yeah.
Manjiro's way back when, but it's still about belonging, who am I? Those big questions, they never get old.
And on that note, dear listeners, one last thought to leave you with. We see Manjiro changing, But what about the Whitfields, even young Carrie? How did they change because of him? Because someone so different came into their lives. Something to think about next time you're reading Heart of a Samurai or just, living life. Until next time, keep exploring.